Masechet Pesachim, Kof Daled 104. We're talking about the text of Havdalah, and we're three topics. So first of all, how many distinctions, how many Havdalot should we say in the text? Second, what are the sources in the Torah for those distinctions? They should come from the Torah. And then finally, what's the concluding bracha of Havdalah? So we start off. Gufa, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Oshaya, Hapoteach, lo yifchot mishalosh, v'mosif, lo yosif al sheva. We're recording something we mentioned yesterday, that when one says Havdalah, and makes different distinctions, ben or lechoshech, ben Yisrael amim, one should not say less than 3, and not more than 7 phrases, distinctions. So yesterday, that means actually either 3 or 7, not even anything in between. Question about that from a Tosefta. Metibe. Omer Havdalot b'mosei Shabbatot ובמוצאי ימים טובים, ובמוצאי יום הכיפורים, ובמוצאי שבת ליום טוב, ובמוצאי יום טוב לחולו של מועד, אבל לא במוצאי יום טוב לשבת. הרגיל אומר הרבה, ושאינו רגיל אומר אחת. Our question is going to be from the last phrase, but let's explain the whole thing first. One has to say Havdalah on all of these occasions. At the end of Shabbat, when the next day is going to be Chol. At the end of Yom Tov, when the next day is going to be Chol. At the end of Yom Kippur, when the next day is going to be Chol. When Shabbat leads into Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is a lower level sanctity than Shabbat, so you have to distinguish, right? We're leaving Shabbat and going to a lower level. That's a distinction. And at the end of Yom Tov, that goes to Chol HaMoed, even though not to Chol, it's still a holiday. Nevertheless, you might think not to say Havdalah because it continues a holiday, but no, you're now allowed to do malacha, so it goes. It's a lesser distinction. When do you not say Havdalah, even though a day is over? When you have Motzei Yom Tov going into Shabbat, because then Yom Tov is going into a higher level of kedusha. So you're saying kiddush anyway. Kiddush is what you say when you're going to a higher level from Chol to Shabbat. You say kiddush. From Yom Tov to Shabbat, you're now adding the prohibition against cooking. So there's no need to say Havdalah because you're not taking anything away. What's interesting here, and this is for a salt towel, is that the fact that it doesn't say anything about Yom Kippur to Shabbat or Shabbat to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur to Shabbat is a higher level, but Shabbat to Yom Kippur, you might think it should mention. So is this possibly a proof that Yom Kippur did not fall out on Friday and Sunday? It just didn't happen, and this is a Tanaitic source, and yet it's missing altogether. I mean, you might say maybe you don't say Havdalah, but it should mention it in the second part. Maybe you'll say Shabbat and Yom Kippur are equal because they're equal in melacha, and that's why you don't say Havdalah. But then, nevertheless, it should say not Motzei Yom Kippur to Shabbat. Doesn't say anything neither way. So the fact that it doesn't say anything, perhaps this could be a proof that they did. Even if they didn't have a set calendar, they did arrange it in some way. Okay, anyway, the point of our question here is one who knows how to say a lot, he can say a lot. But someone who doesn't know, he doesn't regularly, in Hebrew and English, the same word, agil means regularly. He's not accustomed to do it in such a way, right? He follows the nusach, what he always says, or maybe he's not well versed enough to be able to say by heart. They didn't have sidurim. So if he's not so well versed, then he just says one bracha. If he wants to say more, he says more. You see, according to this, that you don't have to have 3 as minimum. You can say even 1 is minimum, and that's fine. So that's a contradiction against the Rabbi Oshaya. The answer is Tana'ehi. The truth is, it's a machloket between Tana'im. This Baraita only represents one opinion, and Rabbi Oshaya was following a different opinion. Damar Rabbi Yochanan. Benan shel Kiddushim Omer Achat. We know someone who is known by a nickname, the son of the holy ones. We'll see why he's called that. Benahagu ha'am lomar shalosh. He said only 1. He's not specifically called holy because he only said 1 distinction in Havdalah, but for other reasons. And yet most other people say 3. Manihu benan shel Kiddushim. Who is this? Truth is, there are very few people in Jewish history that get the appellation of Kadosh. You have a few. Not too many. But anyway, the Bi Menachem Bar Simai. This one is this rabbi, this sage, Menachem, the son of Simai, benan shel kedushim. Why was he called the son of holy ones? Because he would never look at the faces, the images that are on coins. So here is a coin as an example, a Macedonian coin, and on it has a picture of the goddess Greek Dionysus. I should have given a trigger warning. If you want to be holy, you can close your eyes right now. Okay, so you see, it's picturing a mythological god from Greek of the Greeks, and so therefore, by looking at it, you're going to giving it some respect. Maybe you'll come to put some trust in it, and so therefore he would be so careful from that, not even to look at it at all. Most coins had a picture of the emperor on it, which would technically be fine to look at. But the Roman emperors claimed to be deities themselves. And so that also is another reason to go beyond the letter of the law and not look at that either, right? Something very interesting is if you look at Jewish coins, whether they be from the Hashmonaim or Bar Kokhba or the modern state of Israel, none of them have pictures of people, faces on it, right? Unlike pretty much most other countries, maybe except the EU. I think the EU doesn't have any people on it because they don't want to be particular. Okay, so he would never look at the coins. Shalach le Rav Shemuel bar Idi Hananya achi omer achat vele tilcheta kevate. And so Rav Shemuel sent a message and said, my brother Hananya says one beracha, but the halacha is not. Then this goes into Aramaic. This is the Gemara commenting on that and saying halacha is not to follow that one single opinion who says one. Okay, so in fact, it is a machloket of Tanaim, and so we have a couple of sages here who said they were great sages, and they just said one. So that's sufficient, and that's why this baraita here was saying, yes, you can. If you don't know how, you only say one. That's fine. But Rabbi Elazar was following a different opinion because we said here, right, that it's not in fact all opinions, right? But some people say Nahagut to say three, so he's following that Tana, even though he's not Mora. Okay, good. Now that we established how many, you can't go make up distinctions, any distinctions you want, right? Who separates between Coke and Pepsi. No, it has to be something that comes from the Torah itself. So Metibe, question on that. Let's actually analyze. Here's a baraita that's going to list about 8 different distinctions. Are they really all from the Torah? Looks like they're not if you look carefully. Said Havdalah he'ach, Omer hamabdil ben kodesh lechol. 1. Ben ol lechoshich. 2. Ben Yisrael lamim. 3. Ben yom hashibi l'sheshet yema maseh. 4. Okay, that's the 4 that you always say. We mentioned yesterday that the 4th one is not standalone, but actually is just a conclusion, summary, because you always have to have a summary at the end of the body. Okay, but right now we're understanding it as a 4th distinction, and now a few more. So we did that. Ben tameh latahor. Right, so that's number 5, between pure and impure and pure. Ben hayam lecharava, between dry land and water. Ben mayim elyonim lemayim atachtonim, between the upper waters and the lower waters, referring to the beginning of creation, right? And the rakia above and waters below. Ben kohanim leviim v'Yisraelim, between, right, priests, Levites, and Israel. So you see that there's 4 original ones, and then 4 more. There's 8 here altogether. Now, the Baraita continues and talks about the ending. V'chotem beseder bereshit. When you end off, you should say, there's end of Havdalah. We say, right, Baruch Hamdi ben Kodesh Lechol. But according to this, you'd say, Baruch Mesader Bereshit. Since really most of the distinctions here are in the beginning of creation. It is true. All the first days of creation is God taking the chaos and separating, each making order out of the chaos by putting every item in its place. It requires a lot of separations. And distinctions and language and all that. So this is appropriate also because we're ending Shabbat. We're starting Yom Rishon. So this is like kind of the beginning of the order of Bereshit. In a way, creation is not a one-time event, but it's an ongoing event. Every week it's renewed. So that's an appropriate bracha. Acharim omrim beyoser Bereshit. It's not only it's even further. It's not just the order that's in creation, but we're reminding ourselves of the creation of all of nature as it becomes recreated all the time. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer Chotem Mekadesh Israel. So he says, no, don't talk about Bereshit, talk about Israel, because one of the distinctions is Hamavdil ben Yisrael Amim. And so let's emphasize the fact that it's really this distinction belongs to us because we're the ones that keep Shabbat and make that a holy day and now go on to our week. So that really depends on Israel being themselves holy and acting in that holiness. So therefore focus on the national part, not the natural part. V'imita. Okay, so that's the end of the Baraita. Now here's our question. And if it's true that all of the formulas of distinction have to be from the Torah, ha ben hayam lecharava laketiva behavdalah. Doesn't say the word Havdalah when God separates the water and the dry land in Kiryat Yamsuf. It's true, right, that the water is separated from the dry land also in the third day of creation, right, between the water and dry land, but doesn't say the word Havdalah there as it does in other places, by Havdel Elokim and so on. So therefore, Semeh mikan ben hayam lecharava. You're right, it's a good question, and we should erase that one from the list. Okay, so erase that one, and now we're going to be left with 7, which is still fine because we said you have to. The maximum is 7 anyway. So good. We solved 2 problems with 1 deletion. Ben Yom Hold on, we have to erase another one because, right, the one in the middle, the 4th one, that was not considered a standalone, right? We said yesterday that you say 3 distinctions, and then you have to close the body with the conclusion. Like anyone who knows how to write a good essay, right, knows that. Yeah, so that's not its own distinction, but rather a summary of the ones before. And so you're going to have to take that out of the list also. And now we had 8, but we took away 2. Now you only have 6, but you said we have to say 7. Where are you going to have the 7? Amri, Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, Tere Milenin Hu. Oh, so the distinction, the last one that we had, is not 1, but rather counts as 2. The difference between Kohanim, Leviim, that's 1, and the difference between Leviim and Yisraelim, that's 2. Right? There's 2 separate distinctions, and we know that because of the Pesukim. Ben Leviim Yisraelim Dichtiv. Ba'aytahi in Devarim it says, Hivdil Adonai et Shevet HaLevi. Hashem says, I distinguished, right? And says the word Havdalah, separated the tribe of Levi. So that's 1. Ben HaKohanim Levim Dichtiv. This is in Divrei Yamim. Bnei Amram Aharon uMoshe. Vayibadel Aharon laHakatisho Kodesh Kadashim. Right? Aharon was separated to be a holy, to be the holy of holies and serve with special distinction. So there you go. That's the word Havdalah in the Tanakh for both of those. So now we're back to 7. Okay, finally, the last point of our outline, what should be the text of the conclusion of the blessing? We already mentioned 3 opinions in that Baraita, so we're going to follow up on that. Mihatam Mayahatem. How does one conclude Havdalah? Rav Amar Mekadesh Yisrael. Ushmuel Amar Hamabdil ben Kodesh Lechol. 2 opinions. Rav says Mekadesh Yisrael, as we said before, right? It's between the distinction between Israel and nation is one distinction that is mentioned that we say, and also it relates to Shabbat, right? Because we're the ones that keep Shabbat. Shmuel Amar, he says, no, ben Kodesh Lechol. That really zeroes in on exactly what we're doing right now. We're separating holy time to mundane time. The word chol, by the way, seems to come from the root as same root as sand, right? You see that in Hebrew, chol doesn't mean profane as they translate here. It doesn't always mean that anyway. Profane sounds like something negative, right? The sacred and profane is bad, good and bad. But truth is, the 6 days of the week, there's nothing bad about them, right? They're kind of dependent on each other. If you had Shabbat all the time, you wouldn't have 6 days of working, 6 days of being productive and helping people and improving the world. That's just as necessary, and you need that to build up to Shabbat when you can enjoy all that we have worked for. You need to prepare in order to have Shabbat. So chol is not so much that that's profane, anything bad about it. It's just common, like sand, right? It's just there's nothing special built there. It's not it's something that has no special distinction. Okay. Anyway, so that Shmuel says the second one. Layet ala Rabbaye v'tem Rav Yosef ahad Rav. Either Abaye or Rav Yosef cursed anyone who would follow the opinion of Rav and say Mekadesh Yisrael. Wow, that's pretty serious. I mean, okay, we have machloket all the time. There's different ways to say things. I mean, both get to the same place. What's the big deal? Why do you have to curse some people that say Mekadesh Yisrael? So one theory is that they're so against this because it's a polemic against Christianity. Christians turned Sunday into the day of Shabbat. When you say Mekadesh Yisrael, it sounds like you're saying Kiddush, right? And if it's Saturday night, if you're saying something that sounds like Kiddush, then you may be hinting, maybe you're a closet Christian, a closet meaning a Jew, or who's acting like the Christians and celebrating Shabbat on Sunday, or maybe an actual Christian. Christians called themselves the real Israel, right? They thought that the Jews were rejected and that they are now the real Israel. So if you say Mekadesh Yisrael, then the Abaye and Rav Yosef would suspect that person of being following the Christian calendar, and therefore he says, no, don't do that. It's a bad thing to do. Obviously, that's not what Rav meant, but maybe it was used in such a way. So that's why they were so antagonistic. And in the end, we do that. We do not do that. We say Havdalah ben Kodesh Lechol. Tana mishemed Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananya kol achotem mekadesh Yisrael vehamabdil ben Kodesh Lechol marichin lo yamav ushnotav. Anyone who says both, right, includes Rav and Shemuel. Why not? We do this in other cases. Like after someone goes to the bathroom, we say Rofeh kol basar u mafli la'asot. Actually, it's a machloket. Some say Rofeh kol basar. Some say mafli la'asot. Rav Papa says, so say both. Right? Why not? They're both nice things to say. So here also, Yoshua ben Chananya says, say both. If you say a long ending, you'll have long life. Don't worry about the extra 2 seconds. You're not taking away anything from your life. So, however, but we do not follow that. Instead, we follow Shemuel, and we only say Hamabdil ben Kodesh lechol. I mean, see, so it could be Rav is not only do you not have to, but it could be a negative if it's interpreted as we said before. Ula, we have the story. Ikla de Pumbedita, fantastic story. Ula is from Eretz Israel. One time he went to the Babylonian city of Pumbedita. Amar le Rav Yehuda le Rav Yitzchak Bere. Rav Yehuda was a great sage in Pumbedita, and so now you have this distinguished guest coming to town. So Rav Yehuda tells his son Rav Yitzchak, I have a mission for you. Listen, Zil. Amtele kalkala de pere. Go and take this basket of fruit. It was Saturday night, right after Shabbat. And go to Ula and give him this basket of fruit, right? Why? Not just to be nice. I'm sure they wanted to be nice and give him a gift, but he had an ulterior motive. You're going to bring him this nice fruit. He's going to want to eat, so one of the grapes. And so he's going to have to say Havdalah. And I want you to pay attention to how Ula says Havdalah, right? How many distinctions does he make? How does he say the ending? We want to learn a halacha from him. No better way than to just watch what he does. La Azal. Rabbi Yitzchak did not listen to his father. He didn't go. Instead, Shadar le Abaye. He sent a younger colleague, Abaye. Abaye, you go. Why should I have to bother? I have other things to do. All right, Abaye, you take this basket, go. Ki ata Abaye amar le hechi amar. So Abaye went there, he came back, and then he asked him when he came back, so what'd you see? Amar le Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol amar vetula. That's it. He said just short version. Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol. He said the whole thing. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol. He didn't add lots of things. He didn't add an opening and an ending and all that. That's all he said. Okay. Ata lekame de abu. Amar le hechi amar. Amar le ana laazle. Ana shadrite le Abaye. So now Rabbi Yitzchak, he got the message. He got the message from his friend Abaye. Now he comes to the father. The father came to him. So he came to his father, and the father says, "So what'd you find out? What did he say?" He says, "Actually, I didn't go. I sent Abaye." And Abaye came back and he told me that all you do is say Baruch Hamdibin Kodesh Lachol. Okay, for sure he's reporting about the ending, right? Sounds like he's reporting about the previous thing also, but for sure the ending is supposed to be this. Here's the key line. Rab Rebatune demor usrar ruteh demor karma lemor de la tema shemate mipume. Okay, memor usually means master. Usually a student would say it to a teacher. Here it's the father saying it to the son, but he's saying it in an ironic way. And he's saying, the master's haughtiness, you, my son, Rabbi Yitzchak, your haughtiness and your pride, right? You're wanting to be high up and in charge, is caused you to not say a tradition in his name. In other words, if you had gone yourself and you came back, then everybody in the future would remember this halacha in your name, and they would say, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak b'shem Ula, right? Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol, and you would have been, you would have been memorialized in the tradition, and that would have been a wonderful thing. And now, because you sent Abaye, why'd you send Abaye? You said, oh, it's beneath me to go deliver a package myself. Why? I'm too important. I can send my lowly messenger to do it. You think you're being so great and high on yourself. No, it's your haughtiness, and now you're lost from the tradition. Okay, an amazing story. It shows how much the rabbis were felt that their future, right, their legacy was built into the chain of tradition. And so, to be able to say something new or to remember a tradition from the past, and you say it in your teacher's name, and your student say it in your name, that's what gets you to be ensconced forever as part of the Torah Shebe'al Peh. And that was in the way their key to being remembered in the future. And so now he lost out on that. Okay, happens to be we have the story, so we actually know that Rabbi Yitzchak, we know his name, and now we know his involvement of it. But there's like two different ways that things are transmitted in Talmudic times. One is halachot, that are just short halachot that are remembered, or officially remembered by memorizers in the names of those who said it. And so you want to be registered in that source book. And then other things like these agadot and stories were retold, maybe even written down sometimes, but without any official being memorized. So, it's just as likely that the story could not have been memorized and we wouldn't have known it. And so maybe there's lots of other stories where you have something like this. And so we don't really know who actually heard it because maybe, there wasn't transmitted. It wasn't transmitted, maybe because of a story like this. All right, so we got to learn some good musar from that. Metibe, a challenge to this. The challenge now, it still looks like we were learning from Ola one thing for sure, that his ending was like Shemuel said. Okay, that's good. But in addition, it looks like he's saying a very simple beracha, not the complex beracha, right? Here's the one that we usually say, right? We start off with Baruch Atah Hashem Ekel Melech Haolam, and then we have a body, and then we have a conclusion. Baruch Atah Hashem Avdil Ben Kodesh Lechol. The opening has Shem Malchut, the closing doesn't. So that's a typical beracha format. And here's the general rule: Kol berachot kolam potech bebaruch vechotem behen bebaruch. All berachot should start and end with a baruch and have some kind of body in the middle. Chutz mi birkat mitzvot. Berkat perot, except for berkat mitzvot. Any beracha that one says before mitzvah, like lahaniach shekadishan mitzvotav sivanu. Any beracha that has that phrase, right? Lahaniach tefillin, al netilat lulav. All those are just one line, no opening and conclusion. That's it, just simple. And also perot, borei pri ha'etz, right? All the berachot nehenin are that. Uberacha semucha lachaberta. Also, a beracha that's part of a series does not have an opening. Example of a series is Birkat HaMazon. The first beracha starts Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam and ends with Baruch Atah Hashem Hazan Hatakol. But the next beracha opens Nodeh, right? Not an opening, it has a conclusion. The third one also has no opening, beracha, but has a conclusion. Another example is the Amidah. We start off with Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and we conclude Magen Avraham. The next beracha, Atah Gibor, starts without. I said the wrong Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu v'Elohei avotenu leAbraham, and so on. Right, that's the opening. But all the rest of the 19 berachot do not have an opening because they're linked to the one before. So it doesn't need to have its own opening because it links to the very first beracha. So those are the three the exceptions. Also, beracha acharona shebekiriat Shema, the last beracha in of Kiryat Shema, which would be like Veyatziv, right? Also, that's actually connected to the ones before Shema, even though Shema is in the middle. You say Yosed and Abat Olam, and then Emet V'Yasiv or Ve'emunah, and those don't have a conclusion, don't have an opening beracha, and so on. Okay, so those are the exceptions. Sheyesh mehen poteach behen bebaruch ve'en chotem bebaruch. Some of these, we said all berachot have openings and closing except for these. Within those exceptions, some of them open with Baruch, but do not have a conclusion. That will be the one-liners, like Birkot HaMitzvot or Berei Pri Ha'etz. It just opens, and that's it, stops, no conclusion. And some, Yesh Men Shechotem Bebaruch Ve'en Potech Bebaruch. Some have no opening. They do have a body and a conclusion, but no opening. Those are the chains. Also, another exception to all the exceptions is Atov HaMetiv, Potech Bebaruch Ve'eno Chotem Bebaruch. The last beracha of the fourth beracha of Birkat Hamazon was added at a later date after a Betar, which is referring to Bar Kochva. It was terrible death and destruction, and the Romans did not permit the Jews to bury their dead. And finally, when they were able to, they added this beracha, Hatov HaMetiv, but that starts off with Baruch and also ends with but does not end. It's a simple beracha, right? That's it. That's the last beracha of Birkat Hamazon, because added later it does. It's a simple beracha. All right. Anyway, why do we bring all this? Kashya le'olah. This is a challenge to olah because according to this, Havdalah is not one of the exceptions, right? It's not a Birkat Mitzvah. It's not a berachat nehenin that you say on fruit. So it should not be simple. It should have some body. Where's the body? אמר לך אולה, הנמה כברכת המצוות המייד. ברכת המצוות מה טעמה? משום דהודאה היא. הנמה הודאה היא. He says this is like ברכת המצווה. We're not actually saying it before the performance of a mitzvah, so it's not technically, but how is it similar? What's the purpose of Birkot HaMitzvah? It's to thank God, right? We feel thankful that we have this holiness, Asher Kedushanu b'mitzvotav, and you commanded us to do this mitzvah, and we feel holy thereby. Thank you for that. So Havdalah also is a thanks, and especially has to do with Kedusha also, right? We're grateful that we had this experience of Kedusha, and therefore, since it's also a statement of praise, not a prayer, not requesting something, as like the Amidah, most of the Amidah is, but only a praise, so therefore it fits into the category of Birkot HaMitzvah, and it's okay, it can be simple. All right, very good. Rav Hananya bar Shelemya v'tamidei de Rav Havu yatveh v'seudata v'ka'eh ilavayu Rav Hamnuna Sava. This is already going to the next stuff. I'm going to end there. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.